Hi everyone, thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Natalie Erazo and I'm the coordinator of repertory and specialty film programs at BAM. I'd like to thank FilmRise, Maven Pictures, and Symbolic Exchange for making this virtual sneak peek of Driveways possible and for organizing such a thoughtful tribute to the late Brian Dennehy, who we are commemorating tonight. A few community guidelines before we begin. If you have any questions for our guests, you may start adding those to the chat box to the right of the screen, and we'll do our best to get to them later on in the conversation. We have a zero tolerance policy for any hateful language, and our staff will be closely monitoring the chat conversation. We'd like to thank any BAM members who are tuning in tonight. And if you're not already a member but are interested in learning more, you may visit our website, bam.org, for more information. And with that, we're really honored to welcome back filmmaker Andrew Ahn, as well as members of the cast, Hong Chau, Lucas Jaye, Christine Ebersole, and screenwriters Hannah Boss and Paul Thureen. And we'd also like to extend our gratitude to Kanara Price, who will be providing ASL interpretation for the duration of the conversation. So thank you all for joining us tonight. I was wondering if you'd all like to give a brief introduction of yourselves. We can start with Andrew.
Yeah, I'll start. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Ahn. I'm the director of Driveways.
Hi, I'm Hannah Boss, and I am one of the co-writers.
I'm Paul Thureen. I'm the other writer.
Hi, my name's Lucas
Jaye. Well, we're a mother and son duo, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, then I'll go. Hi, my name is Lucas Jaye. I am the actor who plays Cody.
Hi, I'm Christine Ebersole, and I play Linda.
Great. Thank you all so much for joining us again. And to everyone watching, thank you for bearing with our grid view. We're trying out a new format tonight. So we'll dive right in. Andrew, welcome back. Just a little over a month ago, we had you here to speak about your first film, Spa Night. So this is kind of a nice full circle moment. And I was wondering, Driveways is a little bit of a departure from Spa Night in that you didn't necessarily write this one. We had Hannah and Paul to thank for that, but it still very much feels in the realm of the themes that concern coming of age and intergenerational relationships. So I was wondering if you could speak more to that and what drew you to the script initially.
Yeah, when I first read Driveways, I was just struck by how like beautiful and human the story was. I think that there are a lot of projects, a lot of films out there that are, like cool or, like cynical, and that to me, I don't think is something that I'm interested in as a filmmaker. I love that the drama of Driveways isn't caused by a villain or hatred. The drama is caused by people who love each other too much, and that to me is such a special kind of story, and for me, kind of more tragic in some ways. And so that plus, just how lovely the team was, to work with Hannah and Paul, who told me, that this was their favorite thing that they'd ever written and the most personal thing that they'd ever written. Like, I was so inspired to do this, but also like super nervous because that's a lot of pressure to put on someone. But I really, I wanted to do a really beautiful job, and to get to work with the producers Joe Piro and James Seamus, like, it felt like, okay, great, like let's embark on this journey.
And Hannah and Paul, that's a good transition to ask you all. Your background is in theater and comedy for a large part, and I'm wondering, with such a quiet and minimalist script like this one, was it always the intention to dwell on the relationship between Cody and Del, or was there ever sort of thinking of making this more feature Kathy's relationship with April and that grieving?
That's a good question. I think it was really about these three people and sort of managing the relationships that come from, neighbors. And it's definitely a triumvirate story. Like, there's this triangle, and And I would say it's really about the 3 rather than 2. Anyway, you kind of do the math, because we were kind of just constantly balancing the mother and son, and then the son and Del.
I think that Hannah, one of the sort of inspirations of this was Hannah growing up in her mom's antique shop and often going into people's houses after they died and going through their families would have them come in and go through things. And Hannah would always talk about sort of learning about people through the objects. And so I think that the April does sort of hang over the movie in a way. And there was such a beautiful production team as well. And sort of, I think for us, the connection to theater is often we were interested in our plays about the stories that objects and architecture hold and sort of the ghosts that they hold. And I think that felt like a little connection to this world, that we were able to sort of keep that interest in objects and tell the story of the sister through the objects, and seeing Kathy learn about this other person. But that the heart of the movie was really sort of what these 3 people found in each other and what they needed at this moment during this summer.
Maybe it's a 4-person story, but one of them's not alive.
Yeah, very much so. Hong and Lucas, I want to transition to asking you both about how you came to prepare for your respective roles. You have such a playful dynamic between the 2 of you, and something that feels very refreshing and raw as far as parent-child relationships go. And I was wondering what that process was to create that care between you both on and off screen.
Go ahead, Lucas.
Oh, okay.
It looked like you were about to say something, but then
I'm just like
stopped.
wondering if we were actually going to say something at the same time.
We did.
Yeah. Well, Andrew did have a chemistry read for us and Hong, and he just kind of like saw that little connection between each other. And during set, like in off screen, we would, talk to each other, have like a little conversation before the scene would start. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we got off to a really great start. Andrew was very smart to do that in our first chemistry read together. He came in really prepared with some questions, and we didn't jump into the scenes immediately. He just had a list of questions to sort of get a conversation started between Lucas, well, the 3 of us actually, because all 3 of us answered those questions together. So it was just a nice conversation that didn't make it feel like Lucas was being interviewed and that he, had to give a right answer. So that was just really fun. And then we jumped into the scenes, and I knew that Andrew wasn't looking to see a perfect scene. He wanted to see a relationship. And for me, I just wanted to see if this little kid would let me touch him and let me stroke his hair and let me hug him, or if he would just shrink away from me. And he didn't do that. So yeah, it was great. Oh, and another thing that I think is super helpful was helpful for me was that Lucas's parents were so great. This was my first time working with a child actor, and I knew that the parents would always be a part of that relationship. But what they did was really let Lucas have his own space. They weren't really hovering and wanting to be a part of the experience. They let him do it on his own. And so the time that Lucas and I had on set was really our own. And so that's how we were able to develop a relationship.
And Christine, you enter the film with very much comedic relief and imbuing the script with a bit of a pot stirrer energy in this town. I'm wondering what drew you to this role and how you went about preparing for this particular role on screen, but in general as someone who typically comes from the stage and from theater.
Well, what drew me to this part was first being offered the role. So I'm very thrilled that I was offered the part, that they had the confidence in me to offer me the role in such a wonderful, beautiful film. And I think that the thing that was really delightful for me was that it felt very organic, just the whole process If I had an idea about something, you know, just in terms of the language that the character used, everything was just, you know, met with open arms and incredible generosity. So it just made the experience, you know, it made it possible really to do it. There were no impediments to realizing who this character was. And I don't know, coming from the stage, I don't know. I mean, I just guess that means that I'm big, but but you know, you try to make it like that, you know. So I just had a great time.
Thank you. Andrew, you had the honor, everyone had the honor of working with the great stalwart that was Brian Dennehy, and who we're holding in light tonight. And so, yeah, what was that experience like? And I was wondering if you could speak specifically about that final scene between him and Lucas at the end that is so tender, and I think kind of provides a lot of this backbone of what the crux of their relationship is.
Yeah, you know, I am so honored and thankful that I got this opportunity to work with Brian, you know, especially for this film that, you know, showed not just who he was as an actor and his abilities, but also who he was as a human being. You know, when we were thinking about that character of Dell, you know, we needed to find someone that had this kind of you know, tough exterior, but that by the end of the film you see this vulnerability, and Brian was that person, and he had that facility to represent that on screen and on stage so beautifully. You know, what I was so inspired by was that, like, Brian wanted to do the work, you know. He, you know, tried so hard, you know. He like got in and out of a car, which is hard for him because of his knees, you know. Like he wanted to do the work, you know. He really could have come in and you know, phoned in a performance, and I would have been just so thankful for that. But you know, he really put in this effort that was just so cool, you know. That scene in the film where Dell tells Cody that he is moving to Seattle at the end of the summer. You know, we shot Brian's close up first, and then we shot Lucas's. And then when we finished the scene, Brian came up to me and said, "Hey, like, Lucas is like, he was doing such like amazing things in that scene, and it gave me some ideas. You know, I'm really inspired. Can I do another take of my side of this?" And the fact that, like, you know, he wanted to, you know, that he was inspired by his young co-star, that he wanted to stay on set instead of like go back and relax. Like, that to me is just so, it's like, it's so cool. Like, I hope I'm that motivated, you know, when I'm like 80 years old, like working on a movie. You know, I think that was such a gift to have, you know, especially for a film like Driveways, which is a film that really needs to feel authentically, you know, like full of heart, and he gave us that, you know, through his generosity.
Yeah, one of the things that as I was watching interviews of him speaking about the film and his experience working with everyone, the way he spoke about you, Lucas, and specifically as a young person, who he said something to the effect of, he's a child actor who's not playing a child, or he's not trying to play a child. And that really stuck out to me. I think just like this very genuine and sincere energy that you brought to the role. And I was wondering if you could speak to that scene specifically at the end, working with Brian and also developing a relationship, this unlikely friendship with him, both on and off screen.
I met Brian before we did the entire film, like before we started the film process, and you know, he was a really nice person. And during that scene, like it was like very slow, it was very emotional. And like before we even started the scene, we would like do it so it could sound like very extremely natural. He stuck around until like he thought it was like really good. He wanted to practice with me specifically, and you know, just to get some chemistry around that. And yeah, he was a really nice person, and I do miss him a lot.
Thank you for that. We're going to turn it over to some questions from the audience now, and please do keep adding yours to the chat box. We have a question from Jennifer. Were there any special moments in the film that you envisioned one way, but became perhaps more than you initially thought? If so, and what were some examples? Perhaps a question for Andrew or any of the actors.
I'll jump in really quick, and y'all can think of things. It's a moment really early in the film where Kathy and Cody are driving into this small town, and they're at a rest stop, and Kathy's smoking a cigarette, and she gets caught by Cody, and she, you know, throws it down on the ground. And I remember we were filming that scene, and I turned to my cinematographer, and I was like I'm good with this. Like I think we're good to move on. And he's like, hey, like, are you seeing this? And I'm like, what? He said, Lucas is like stomping out, you know, Hong's cigarette each time. Like let's get that, you know. And so we got a close up of that moment, and you know, it's just like Lucas's foot, like, you know, stomping out the cigarette. And for me, you know, it's that kind of observational quality in the writing that really inspired me as a director, you know, and I think really inspired the entire crew, like to find those little moments, you know, and the kind of depth of these relationships, you know, and this experience that we're with, you know, with these characters. Another thing that I really love is the costume design by Matthew Simonelli. Like, I remember he came with this idea that, oh, like Kathy and Cody should share clothes, you know, like he should wear some of the shirts that she's wearing. You know, they came into town thinking they were going to be here for a week. They would totally share clothes. And that to me, like, made me cry. And I was like, oh, like, you're our costume designer and you're going to make this film so beautiful. And so it's just, you know, I think all of the collaborative energy like led to these kind of beautiful ideas that made this film feel more profound.
Did anyone else want to respond to that question?
I would actually be curious to hear what the writers thought, since they wrote it, and you know, we did our own thing with it. And how do you feel about
I mean, I really like the film. There's a moment that Hong does in the VFW that really kills me, and it's like a tiny happy birthday that you say to Cody. And I just really, I really love that little moment. And it's like this added layer. And it's just a little whisper that's just so beautiful. That's like this extra layer that you guys just took the script, you know, this whole collaboration has been just, someone said it before, organic, but it was really fun just to see the layers and the things that just went so much deeper. You know, the sets were just so beautiful and funky and hoardery, and you know, even the sound was really kind of this other layer that, you know, on the page I think we knew it, but then there's some like mouse sounds, and there's some other just layers of crawly creepy that that really just made you know, just the whole thing just so much more three-dimensional and exciting in the world.
Andrew talked about Kijin, the cinematographer, and they have such a great relationship. And there's, when I heard that question, there's two things that came to mind. One is the fireworks scene, sort of the fear of the fireworks and then how it turns into this beautiful moment, and also Roger reciting Thanatopsis, how both of those are like sort of the two moments that are almost, you know, they're a little bit more, it's such a grounded film and all the performances are so grounded, and there are these two, you know, a couple of these moments that are just sort of sublime and almost surreal that that I never would have imagined that way, and they're just sort of just absolutely favorite moments of mine.
I am curious, Hannah and Paul, was what the intentionality was, but behind the geography of the film. It's set in upstate New York in this working class small town. Was that always where you envisioned the story? And perhaps, Andrew, how did that inform your casting process?
Originally, the first versions of the script were Midwest. Paul and I are both Midwesterners, and we had sort of in our minds had like, we sort of had Kalamazoo was in the world, but we were thinking more like Moline and Champaign-Urbana area of Illinois. And then when we were when it was going to get shot in New York, we sort of just changed a few things. Like we did some research on some lawnmower companies and made it an air conditioning company, and just made it make like very true sense to how the geography would go to translate into a New York State story. But it really, Poughkeepsie landed being kind of the perfect location, and the right architecture in the end.
My dad, who is 92 and a retired farmer, did a summer hitchhiking after the Army, and ended up working at the John Deere factory in Moline, Illinois, and then hitchhiking out west to San Francisco in a hearse. And because we're Midwesterners, and we said it there, but it ended up shooting in Poughkeepsie, which is where Hannah and I met in college. And so we actually knew that area of the world really well, and had spent time in Syracuse and things like that, and sort of those industrial Midwest towns, and sort of the feel of the neighborhoods. It's different than an East Coast thing, but sort of the stories in these houses next to each other. It's sort of, we decided not to fake the Midwest because we felt it really worked in this world, and so we sort of tweaked it and reimagined it so it would feel intentionally of the area where we shot.
I remember when Andrew found the houses, he was like, I found these houses. I want to run this by you. Let's talk about this. The porch is actually in the front. And I don't know why, but we were like, oh my God, it's in the front. We had always imagined it in the back. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And like, we had to go into the script and look at that. But like, now I'm like, yeah, it's in the front. That's fine. But it was like small.
Any other way.
Can't imagine any other way. Yeah.
I think for me, what I loved about, shooting in the Hudson Valley was, the cast and crew that we had available to us, the fact that we could work with someone like Christine, who was performing in between shoot days, the fact that we could tap into, the talent that exists in New York City is so cool. I think, I love feeling like I'm grounded in a place where I can, film something. And so I'm glad that we didn't fake it. And, we made adjustments, but they were all really fun, so I think Cody's birthday party was originally supposed to be at a pizza parlor. And then, we found this roller rink in Hyde Park that was perfect. I fell in love with it so much. And we decided we wanted to shoot the birthday party there, and it made so much sense for the story. And then we had our wrap party there. It was, I think we were really embraced by the community and by the area, and we, wanted to be present there.
We have another question from Jennifer. What was something through the making of the film that gave you a different or new perspective in any of your own relationships or how you view community? Anyone who would like to respond to that? Hong, I guess I'm curious how you, in your specific role, kind of coming from a larger city as your background, and kind of uprooting to have to spend time in your sister's house and completely
okay.
life in this
you
moment.
mean my character? I was like, wait
your
a minute,
character.
I'm not from Louisiana. I'm not from Louisiana. I hear this over and over again that Del and Cody's relationship is described as unexpected or unconventional or unlikely. And I actually think that it's the most believable and most likely relationship that would happen in real life. I think we only describe it as unlikely because you just don't see it as often in TV shows and movies. But in real life, I think that this occurs all the time, and it's absolutely the most natural relationship and friendship that gets striked up. For me, to go back to one of the previous questions, the thing that I loved about the film was how light it turned out. I thought that Andrew did such a beautiful job in maintaining the sincerity of all of the heaviness and real struggles that characters were going through, but you didn't feel that burden in the movie. We were all of the characters were dealing with some sort of feeling of loss or regret, and being really reflective, and that's a really hard thing to illustrate in a very light and delightful way, and somehow Andrew managed to do that. So that was one of the things that I was really surprised by, even though we were there, we shot the movie and we were in it, but I just wasn't expecting it to turn out so delightful.
Question from Heidi. My son wants to know, for Lucas, how much like Cody are you? How different are you from Cody? I really liked your performance.
First of all, thank you for well, how am I different from Cody? Because I talk a lot. Cody talks very little. He's a shy kid. I am outgoing. I am very outgoing. And he speaks when he's spoken to usually, and I just like speak randomly sometimes, even though when I'm not even being spoken to. And yeah, like he's very like in his own bubble. I'm just like very like energetic. So yeah, I guess I would say yes, I am pretty different from Cody.
But I should add that I think what you have in common with Cody is like a maturity, like you're both like mature people, and I really like that. And that energy, like we noticed it on set, like Lucas loves to dance, and so yes. Like we knew that we had to like put that in the movie somewhere. And so, if you stay through that first part of the credits in the movie, like you'll see like there's a little dance party in the neighborhood that, for me just like shows Cody being a kid in this way that, like you want him to have that childhood, and so, yeah, I think, we found ways to bring in Lucas's, like love for dance into the movie.
Question from Santa. For Andrew, what's one thing that you learned from making your first feature, Spa Night, that brought with you while making Driveways? Was it more or less difficult making your second feature?
Yeah, I think I'll say two things. On a creative level, I learned a lot from making my first feature in that, the kind of film that you're making, you have to mirror on set in some way. The environment that you create is going to affect the film, even if it's like very kind of subconsciously. And so, like with a film like Driveways, which is, so like heartfelt, and that we had to have that kind of energy on set as well. And and so I made sure like everybody that we worked with, everybody we brought into the cast and crew, like had that kind of like generous energy, and that wouldn't disrupt the kind of like gentleness of what we were doing. The other thing that I learned is that directing is like a physical act, like you're present on set, you are like running around, you are on your feet all day, you're on location, like crouched in corners trying to avoid being seen on camera. And it was a particularly hot and rainy summer in Poughkeepsie. I wasn't wearing the best shoes. Like I lost feeling in two of my toes, like it's a physical feat. And so that was something that like I remembered from Spa Night, and Driveways was a longer shoot, and so I really tried to like prepare myself kind of like an athlete. It's like you get sleep, you eat well, you drink water. You really have to be well physically in order to be there emotionally for your actors, for your crew. You have to be that support system and decision maker and collaborator. So that was something that I learned on Spa Night, and then I really learned on Driveways, and I'll take with me onto my third feature.
We have another question from Ava. Where did the idea of this movie come from? We sort of touched on that, but I guess if Hannah and Paul, you want to further expound on that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just a little bit that we had, we were both sort of, in our personal lives. Hannah can talk about her personal life, but just sort of where we were in our personal lives and relationships to relatives. And for me, I grew up a very scared, shy kid who threw up before every karate lesson and every piano recital and every of my own birthday parties. And my dad was almost 50 when I was born, and I never got along with other kids. And I just had remembered sort of these special relationships that I had with grownups that sort of I came in touch with, and that I found sort of comfort in those relationships when I was scared of the other kids. And my nephew lived near my parents, and sort of watching my dad in his 90s, sort of for the first time in his life, share stories with his grandson that we didn't know, that my mom didn't know. And so for me, sort of those relationships were so special and seemed worthy of having something made about them. And then also just sort of particularly where I was in my life, those were the things that were sort of on my mind. And the ideas of, young people and old people are usually who I enjoy the most, and sort of the strange connections they have, and the connections between, uncertainty about your future and regret. And those relationships felt very, very juicy.
I have a question for Hong. I'm thinking a lot about like the way Kathy orients herself around the space of April's home, and kind of like the spatiality of everything. And I think some of the interesting moments are the time that you take away from Cody, and this sort of fragmented grieving process that you were in. Can you speak about sort of developing that interior world of Kathy and these smaller moments that you have to yourself in the film?
Well, orienting myself physically in the home, I'm the first time I saw the house, the set, Andrew was preparing. He's like, oh, I mean, it's a lot. I don't want you to be scared. And I walked in and I thought, oh, this is nothing. You haven't seen, you have not. I hope my family is not watching this YouTube Q&A, but we have hoarder tendencies in my family, and I understood it, and it's not something that even though I have experience with it in my personal life, it's still something that I can feel is not it's just a reflection of something missing and needing to be filled, and it's being filled in a very material way with Kathy's sister. And for me, I just thought a lot about that, and then I thought about their age difference. I have two brothers, and the age difference between my older brother and my younger brother is 12 years, which is the age difference in the movie. So I just thought a lot about my brothers, and neither of them have children, but I was thinking about what would my older brother be like if he had a child. And so that was kind of you know, the launch pad that I used to create Kathy.
I just want to mention for everyone watching, if you have a question, please do add those to the chat box. We'll be taking just a few more. From Doreen, can Lucas speak to what he learned about himself when making this movie?
Well, like to what I learned from this movie is that it's kind of like I learned in the end of the film, because like all the moral like all comes around in the end. So what I've learned is that to like cherish like every little moment of life. Like just you're gonna miss some things. And sorry, there's a sound going off. Sorry, hold on. And sorry, it's just like a timer for like something for food. And yeah, I just cherish every moment of life because I'm a young person, and I have lots of time to, you know, cherish life as it is now, especially because of quarantine, like right now, like what's going on in the world, like so I like to take the time to, you know, to cherish life right now, especially because of everything right now.
Thank you for that.
No
There's
problem.
a question about the music. What was the process of selecting the music and kind of going through that composition process? Perhaps Andrew, Hannah, or Paul, you can all speak to that intention.
Sure. I got linked up with Jay Wadley, our composer, through our producers. Joe Piero, you know, had worked with Jay on a number of films, including James Shames's film Indignation. And you know, I think what I really loved about my first conversation with Jay was that he, you know, we didn't talk about instruments or, you know, we just talked about the story and what it meant to him, you know, and similar experiences that he went through, you know, like with his family, and that to me just felt so right, you know, that this was the person that would understand the emotions of this, you know, the themes of this film, this story. And so you know, when we started working, it was very organic. You know, again, like the conversations really, you know, were about character and story, and he, you know, found this really beautiful sound that just felt like it's kind of nostalgic. It has this kind of sense of memory and you know, remembering that I think is just so special. And so, you know, when it all came together, it just felt so it really enhanced like everything that, you know, Hannah and Paul's script was doing. It enhanced the performances, and, you know, it enhanced the visuals, like in a way that, you know, that music and score can do, you know, for cinema. And I'm very excited that the score is actually going to be released, and so you can like jog to the driveway score if you want to go running with your mask on. And I think it's, you know, it's he really found the heart and understood the heart of the film, in this way that I think is very, very special and hard to find in collaborators.
I have a question about just like general theme of the film, being connection and the simple yet important nature of being kind to one another and amplifying neighbors and community. And I think in our time of looking towards mutual aid and amplifying each other in the ways that we can, physically distant, but still together, I'm wondering how you all are responding to this in relation to the film and what you hope people take away from it. Christine, you come in pretty explicitly as a caring neighbor in the film, and yeah, I was just wondering how you reflect on that.
Well, I don't think the quarantine really changes that. I still think that, you know, there are people in need, and it's always important to show kindness and consideration. And if people need help, you know, find fellowship in different ways. So that really doesn't change, I guess.
Does anyone else want to respond to that?
I was thinking about this since that earlier question about how this has affected your relationships. And there was just something about, especially when Hannah and I came from theater and we'd write plays and then they're done. And that's what's beautiful about theater. But being able to have this thing that we can share with people, and to be able to have our families all over the place, some who, you know, normally aren't able to come to New York to see our shows, and especially now can't travel. It just feels like, you know, it is a time where we're trying to figure out ways to reach out to people and connect with people and keep these connections going from a distance. And for me, a gift of this movie was, even before this, being able to share this with my family, and all the, you know, Andrew setting this tone of generosity and kindness on the set that really just seeps into every moment of the film. And that being able to share that right now. And my sister watched it 3 times in a row, and she said, it's comforting. Like, I always get stressed out watching movies, and this was a comforting movie to watch. And so I just like that, you know, the way that we can find comfort in each other at a time like this, I feel like is something that is connected to the themes of the film.
Question from Ian. This film felt of a piece with a lot of neo-realist cinema. Andrew, Hannah, and Paul, what were the cinematic touchstones / inspirations you had while making this?
That's a good question. You know, I always find it really tricky to like watch a lot of movies, you know, kind of in preparation to make your own movie, because you end up kind of imitating or copying, you know, and so we really tried to find a cinematic language that felt organic to this location and to these actors, you know. Like, to give you an example, like, you know, my cinematographer Keegan and I, when we started shooting with Hong came in the second week of shooting, because the first week she was actually shooting another movie up in Toronto, and, you know, like, bless her heart for like wanting to do back-to-back movies. When we started shooting with Hong, like, we started doing these long takes, you know, these oneers, where we felt like, oh, like, we don't need the coverage because she can hold this frame so well, you know. And so a lot of it was kind of this organic, you know, kind of holistic process, you know, and not, you know, us as filmmakers trying to impose something onto the story, and instead kind of taking our cues from the story itself and the elements of the story. You know, I love certain filmmakers, you know, of course, like I'm a big fan of Ozu and Koreeda, John Cassavetes, you know, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm trying to be those filmmakers. You know, it was just you know, trying to find a style that felt like Driveways.
A question from Garanet. Christine, you've had a history of working with Brian Dennehy. What are some of your favorite memories of him on set?
Well, it wasn't really on set, it was off set, because he was kind of a neighborhood guy. You know, he was just like a family guy, very straight ahead. There was no pretense and no bull. And you really could relate to him just as almost like a family member, you know, without the baggage. So he was good to, you know, sit in a restaurant with, or sit in a bar with, and just, you know, have conversations. And there were no expectations, and it was just about having a good time. And the honesty and straightforwardness of his character is, I think, what really has a lasting impression, is sort of how to be in life. I really appreciate that I had the opportunity to work with him in these two movies. And you know, of course, who knows that it was going to be his last. So I'm grateful. It was a nice, if you have to exit, it was a nice exit for him.
Question from Vincent. In the filmmaking process, who holds or creates the movie's mood? Is that something that's predetermined or held by one person? What is the tension between holding and letting it come out on its own?
I guess I'll just start by saying, you know, I think when you read something, when you read a script, there is kind of a mood, right? Like, so the first time I read the script, I was kind of in a coffee shop and there are all these people around me. And then I was like, I need to read this again at home and with a cup of tea. And there was, you know, it's like kind of it's a cup of tea script, right? Like, I wanted a cup of tea, and then I like cried so hard, you know? And so there is a mood that's there. But I think, you know, a part of what I wanted to do with Driveways was to highlight the kind of like the dynamic range of what these characters are going through. And so, you know, it's like seeing the joy. Like I like, one of my favorite scenes in the film is when Lucas eats peanut butter and jelly sandwiches with Brian, and it's just like a joyful scene, you know. Like I think it's so much fun. You know, the birthday scene, like Hannah mentioned, like Hong like whispers to Lucas like, make a wish, and I just was like, like, it's so good. You know, I just started like I think the kind of, you know, tone is tricky because you don't want it to like have it flatten your film, you know, and have it all feel the same. And hopefully it's kind of through the range of what's happening that you have something that feels just like life to me, you know. I think that was always kind of the goal, was like, this should just feel like life, you know. Similar with like Lucas's performance, like I didn't want it to be like a super cute Welch's grape juice commercial performance. Like, I wanted it to feel like life.
I think that's a good place to conclude. I did want to announce that Driveways will be available on iTunes, Amazon Prime Video, Google Play, and Microsoft Films, as well as on cable on demand starting tomorrow, May 7th. And the soundtrack will also be available on Friday, May 8th on DPS. And it was once again released by, composed by Jay Wadley and released by Milan Records. So thank you all once again for joining us. This has been really lovely, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in. And I wish everyone to take care, and see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Let's see.